Our next presenter is a Weiser everyone knows very well, Randy Black, from the great city of Dallas, actually Allen, Texas, who is a polymath with a rich cornucopia of life experiences, and he's an author, he's a journalist, he's done photography, he's been a golf pro, and I've forgotten 20 or 30 other things that he's done besides visit many countries. Most recently, Randy is an educator, and he has been mostly teaching language, right? French and Spanish in
social studies.
Yes, as a substitute teacher in the Allen Public School System.
Right.
And he will be telling us some of his, he'll be giving us some anecdotal experiences in his presentation, which is called Diplomas to Nowhere.
Okay, are we ready? Yep. Tasting. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tasting. Good afternoon, my friends. 4:08. For the past 6 years or more, I've fretted about a question that comes up to me almost weekly at Allen High School. For the last 6 years, I've been subbing there in an effort to become a better parent. We have a very bright daughter, as you've heard, and I'm challenged by understanding how to challenge her. And I thought by running classes for a few years, it might give me a hint on what motivates students, what keeps them in school, what keeps them trying to achieve things. So as John said, about 90 to 100 days a year, depending on whether I spend more time or less time in Spain or France, I work at a school with about 6,000 students, about 350 administrators and teachers, 1 million square feet of classroom space, which is 1/3 bigger than the Louvre, and an 18,000 seat football stadium. On one hand, I've had the opportunity to guide some pretty impressive, high-achieving teenagers. Some went on to MIT, University of Texas, Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, and the Sorbonne. I've had feedback from a few of them, and I've had feedback from their real teachers that I take over for. Now, I work in some pretty high levels normally, and the teachers that teach these IB and AP classes need a sub they can count on to carry the load. These kids have a very vigorous annual workload, and they can't afford to take 2 days off while their teacher goes to a conference or is out ill. And so they need someone in there that can carry the load and be responsible for getting them through whatever's on the plan that day. Along the same path, though, I've had a pretty significant number of classes of students who were low achievers. Those students that just don't seem to want to they just want to get through it. That kind of discourages me, and I've become resigned to the fact that there are some students that's just the way they're wired. It can have something to do with their parents not supporting this. It can be a lot of different factors. So, all things considered, I pose the following questions to all of us. Are we awarding high school diplomas that will help students attain a brighter future, or are we awarding diplomas to nowhere? For those among you who can remember presiding over a college freshman class or a high school class, think back. How many of your first-year college students were not qualified to be in your classroom? I know it must have crossed some of your minds. Anecdotal observations on my part over the past few years reinforces my opinion that education standards have and will continue to be dumbed down in order to meet state expectations and to some degree the political correctness goals of various politicians. Most of the teachers in my school are dedicated individuals. Occasionally I run across one who maybe should have picked another line of work. 2 years ago, I went into a class the day before I was due to substitute for the teacher. I had a free day, and so I went over there just to meet her and try to find out if she had a lesson plan for me. And I walked in, and she handed me her lesson plan, and it was a 4-inch by 4-inch Post-it note. Wasn't going to do me much good. she confided me that the previous year she had graduated from a Texas State University, a second-tier university, but nevertheless a state university, and that she'd gotten into that university out of a small town in West Texas, with SAT cumulative score of 1,000. That was the year my daughter had taken her first full-blown SATs when she was 12 at the invitation of Duke University and had made about 1,500, having not even completed a full year of algebra. Putting Duke, by the way, just so you'll know, it's the Duke TIP program, which is an early identification program for Duke and Texas A&M and perhaps some other universities that buy databases of states that have an end of elementary school exam. And they pick the top 5% or so to invite as 7th graders to take the SAT. And it's the full-blown SAT, not the PSAT. Following year, they can take the ACT or the SAT if they meet a benchmark. So Natasha's taken it twice already. And this year in the 9th grade, she's actually going to take the PSAT next week. And she thinks it should be nothing more than a finger exercise at this point for her. What's going on, in my opinion, is that local school boards, state boards of education, and helicopter parents are ensuring that less than 50% of high school graduates are college ready. That's the current number, by the way. My research showed that the class of 2013 nationally, 50% of high school graduates across the country were not totally college ready and required immediate remedial classroom work and tutoring when they got to their local community college or to a four-year university. Lest you not trust my in the trenches experience, my research of federal and state stats and media feedback supports my thesis. Significantly, nearly all of the lower half of the class, did I say the class of 2015? That's what I meant. Across the nation needed this. In Texas, it was actually a little bit higher. But we have a lot of guarantees that a kid that goes to school for 4 years is going to get a diploma. And we also don't have a minority on this problem. I sampled results from databases of a dozen states from Maine to California, and they all tell the same abysmal story. Texas, California, Louisiana, Mississippi, Kentucky, and other states seem to lead the trend in dumbing down graduation requirements to a level that ensures almost any high school kid can get a GPA and credits enough to get a diploma. In the end, it's all about the credits, whether on level, pre-AP, AP, IB, dual high school, college level classes. 10% of my school's student body are involved in dual credit courses. The local community college actually has a wing in our high school, and their professors administer the exams at the end of the course that enable a kid to get out of high school with almost their full freshman year knocked out. Now, aside from the tremendous amount of money that saves their parents, it of course gives the kid a real leg up when they get to school because they already know they're college ready. They've already taken 15 to 18 hours of freshman level courses. Traditionally, college recruiters and hiring managers have used SAT and ACT scores for a clue as to whether you're college ready. And yet, once again, even that testing tool is falling by the wayside, with about 200 colleges, major and minor, now ignoring or dropping the admission requirement of having an ACT or an SAT on your record. It's now becoming more and more an optional part of your resume when you're applying to your local college. Do the nation's average high school graduates really benefit? This is one of my ongoing questions. Do the nation's graduates really benefit from classes in chemistry, physics, economics, and the exciting world of English Lit? Do the students retain any of it? Does a hiring manager at a corporation care whether a student knew that Beowulf was made up of 3,182 alliterative lines in a poem from the 8th century? Decades ago, my mom told me that graduating from high school and college was not about knowing the quadratic equation or the significance of Beowulf. It was about showing that you knew how to start and complete a job and solve problems. In the long run, she said, it's all about knowing how to solve problems and sticking it out until you finish your job. She told me when I was about 14. I gathered that employers want to hire people who can be trusted to show up on time, to perform the work to completion at acceptable levels, and to get along with their coworkers. That's the least qualification that hiring managers are looking for. Which brings me back to the question, are high schools dumbing down the requirements for graduation to the detriment of the American-born workforce? I believe they are. My thoughts are generally based on observations at my high school I've described, and these are a few of the examples I've run across. Last spring, I reluctantly took over a U.S. government class of on-level sophomores. The teacher, coincidentally, a football coach, resigned 2 weeks before Easter break, or more correctly, spring break, to take a job elsewhere. For the following 3 weeks, until they could find a replacement, a certified teacher with a certificate in U.S. government, I managed those 4 daily classes 5 days a week. They're about an hour and a half a class, 25 to 28 students per class, 16 years old roughly. About a third of them were what I call real students. They were there to do a job and they knew it. About a third of them were kind of on the fence. They're sort of halfway between maturity and halfway between being criminals. And about a third of them were basically interested in doing nothing more than playing on their smartphones and flirting with the girl across the aisle, or the boy. I did my best to keep them from starting fires and playing with sharp objects for about 3 weeks. As I looked over the prior teacher's grade book, I found out that the teacher for weeks had been giving him 100 as a daily grade just for showing up. Now you can cure showing up is about a third of your grade if it includes some kind of exercise. That's my experience in higher level classes. But this guy was giving him grades for just breathing the air. And day after day, you can cure a lot of sins in that class just by showing up. Somebody die out back? Okay. All right. He even allowed do-overs on quizzes. So if somebody made a 60, which is a failing grade on a weekly quiz, they were allowed to take the quiz home and open book correct it, bring it in, and get full credit for any of the corrections. Yet some of them would bring it in and only make 70 or 80 because they couldn't even do it with the book. One day I walked into the class and said, what are you guys going to do in 2 years when you're applying to the junior college and you get over to the junior college down the street and they don't allow do-overs? And one kid raised his hand and says, Mr. Black, if they don't allow do-overs, how am I supposed to pass? And he was serious, I think. I couldn't believe it, but I believe it now after 6 years of doing it. Word got around that I was having some questions, and one of the supervisors for my social studies department came to me and talked to me, and he said, Mr. Black, be patient. We're going to find someone. You're only going to be in here for a few more days a week at most. And it was stressful because kids would take the hall pass and go to the bathroom and never come back. And if I don't report them absent within 10 minutes and they go out and get hurt, the lawyers come after me and the school district won't defend me. Literally, if a kid walks out of school, it's against the rules, it'll come back on me if I don't let somebody know as soon as possible that I'm missing. I've got one missing in action. We call those students with happy feet. But day in and day out, I did my best to teach them the ins and outs of the Bill of Rights, checks and balances, the perceived intent of the Founding Fathers, and all the rest of the moving parts of our system. And they kept telling me, be patient. It wasn't like there was a line of certified government teachers waiting for a job mid-year. So they had to really do some searching. It gets worse. Toward the end of the year, I had the opportunity to take over a class called IPC, which stands for Integrated Physics and Chemistry. And it's a workaround of a Texas state law that says you have to have a year of chemistry and a year of physics to graduate from high school. So what they had done down in Austin is some bright guys got together the previous year and came up with this IPC class that in effect crammed a year of physics and a year of chemistry into a one-year class, sort of like pounding 2 pounds of junk into a 1 pound carry-on bag. It doesn't work very well. And the students in this class weren't doing very well. And so the teacher, knowing that, had assigned them a project to build something that was related to chemistry and physics. They had a year to do it, and it would count 30% of their overall grade. The day I walked in, I saw a student sitting in the corner building a bridge out of soda straws. I saw a girl knitting a sweater and another young lady building a dollhouse. And somehow this all related to chemistry and physics. I can understand the bridge. And there's 2 days to deadline, and they weren't anywhere near finished. And I was thinking, geez Louise. Still not convinced. From my online research for this presentation, according to the ACT 2013, of the 1.8 million high school graduates across the nation who took the test last year, only 26% indicated college readiness benchmarks in all 4 subjects. So 400,000, 500,000 kids were college ready in all 4 subjects. 27% were college ready in 2 or 3 of the benchmarks, and 16% of all the high school kids in the country that took the ACT could qualify in 1 of the 4 subjects. Only Wisconsin and Minnesota did more than half of the high school graduates meet 2 or more. In my little corner of Texas heaven, well, I'll skip that. Still not convinced. 2 weeks ago, the NCAA put Southern Methodist University on probation for their basketball program violations. That's the 10th major violation for SMU in the last 35 years. What they had done is they had recruited a local All-American high school basketball player, offered him a $60,000 a year scholarship times 4 years to play basketball for SMU, and he hadn't passed physics in high school. He signed the letter of intent in the spring, and by June he still hadn't passed. He tried it a couple of times apparently. And they said that what they wanted him to do is go online and take it in June. You can take mandatory classes online for about $200 a pop, and they would pay for it. And they said, give the coach your password and username and we'll handle it. They hired a graduate student, paid her money, gave her a title of graduate student assistant to take the class for him. Halfway through the summer, a local investigative reporter for Channel 8, the ABC affiliate, got wind of it, exposed it. NCAA started sniffing around, and a year later, 2 weeks ago, SMU got probation. The head coach lied to the NCAA examination committee. He's a legendary coach, the only coach alive who's taken a team to the NBA championship and the NCAA championship, Kansas and the Detroit Pistons, Larry Brown. Yeah. He's 75 years old now, and he's still doing this and still cheating, because I looked it up. It's not the first time he's been caught doing something you're not supposed to do. The student, well, he's no longer on the basketball team. And it's only been 15 days since this came out, and I've got little bits and pieces here and there. I feel somewhat certain that because they have a contract with him, if I really don't know. In one sense, he's out of school because he's not eligible to be in college because he never legally got his high school diploma. So it remains to be seen how this will work out. Excuse me.
Andy,
yes, sir.
You tell me that one of my grandsons just started SMU.
Well, SMU is a fine university.
Where is it in the basketball?
Well, I mean, SMU is the only university in the history of college football that ever got the death penalty. 20-something years ago, they got the absolute death penalty for about 5 years. They've never recovered. They're basically a club football team these days. They play people like TCU and get beat 73-0. They really should be playing against other fraternities. And I have nothing against SMU, but I have something against a school that 10 times in 30 years they get caught doing things that are criminal. Now, the fine was Larry Brown can't be present at 9 games this year. They lose 9 scholarships over the next 3 years. They lose all the games that this boy participated in last year. They were in a tournament after last year in NIT, I think. They lose 1% of their annual revenue for 5 years and $5,000. So 1% of their basketball revenue, they have about 7,000 seats in that arena, and they generally sell out. So it's a significant amount of money. If there's any doubt that our nation's high school districts are dumbing down the curriculums, one can make a case that the United States Department of Education and the President have done their part. On August 7, 2013, the Department of Education, under the President's signature, issued a first-of-a-kind waiver that allowed 8 school districts representing more than 1 million students in the greater Los Angeles area a 1-year exemption from the No Child Left Behind requirements, which requires students at different grade levels to be proficient in reading and math. The school districts didn't even ask. The Department of Education did it. Since 2011, the administration had granted waivers to 39 states and the District of Columbia. The Department of Education bypassed the State Assembly of California. They bypassed Governor Brown. They went straight to the districts. It's never happened before. That was what my research showed. And I got that through a number of sources online and through the Department of through one of the other departments that apparently doesn't like the Department of Education. And then there's the complicity of the colleges who are dumbing down the entrance requirements. One might think that colleges would use the SAT and ACT exams as a benchmark to ensure that entering freshman candidates are ready for college. More than 190 colleges and universities in this country have now made ACTs, SATs optional or flexible. NYU, State University of New York, University of Texas at Austin, George Washington, Texas A&M, Temple, Bryn Mawr, Wake Forest, DePaul, Drake, Washington State, University of Arizona, Ole Miss, Kansas State, Iowa, Arizona State, and all the rest have gone this route. Stanford is in on this deal too. Our nation's most selective school this year, that's where we're standing, weighed in with a requirement only that the essay portion of the revised SAT be submitted beginning next year, for the school year 2016-17. From Bloomberg Business on Stanford. Pardon me. Students currently write an essay on a topic provided based on their own ideas and without need for accuracy, 25 minutes. Beginning next March, the new version of the exam is introduced when it's the new SAT. They're going back to 2 tests now instead of 3. Students need only show they understand a school-provided text by writing an analysis of it in 50 minutes. Now, those in the yes camp say the new version would resemble more closely the work students will be doing once they get here. I don't know. You guys are the expert on this. I'm just kind of unhappy about some of it. So, more importantly, are the dumbed-down courses resulting in high school diplomas to nowhere? I'll take questions if anybody has any. I know you're all anxious to get out of here.
Thank you, Randy.
That was 15 minutes on the button. 20. Well, okay.
Okay, no.
Yeah.
Question, Tiki has a question.
Yes, sir.
First of all, my sympathies for the experiences. I deal with bigger kids. In some ways, are easier to handle. They don't have faculty. So I do understand that. The dumbing down thesis is not. I can give you a book that makes the same case for universities. here's my problem. The problem is that if I was to tell you that a particular football team is not playing well, it's going down, you would say, well, I'd like to know what it was doing 10 years ago. You know, it's not enough to just say the Niners and the Cowboys are not impressing anyone these days. I could, you know, if I'm saying they're down, you'd like to know, well, they weren't doing better, and I often do not get that kind of that. Because I don't get that when it shows that 10 years ago, there was more readiness. I get anecdotes, I understand that. And it may well be that the experiences that one has are unique to that school. I don't know that. But I don't get that. I don't get the sense that, I don't see the evidence. I do see the evidence that the percentage of kids who do well in SATs, the average SAT is higher than it was 10, 20 years ago. You can do that. If you believe in IQ tests, everybody's getting smarter. Because the IQ test.
There's a point on no return
No,
on that.
I'm saying.
Notice in Minnesota, everyone's above average.
Well, no, but Minnesota, I know what you mean. No, Minnesota and then Wisconsin, the old joke is proximity to the Canadian border is correlated with high test scores, okay? But I just don't see the research base that actually shows that things are, you're doing cross-sectional, you're saying, no, these are examples, and 27%, that looks horrible. But I don't know that there was a golden age. And there's often, again, I'm not arguing you posited a golden age, but a lot of people do. Once upon a time, things were so much better, the standard was so much higher, you were so better motivated, you walked 10 miles to go to school, some of us walked without shoes, some of us walked without feet. And when you get to a certain age, that's my age, which happens to coincide with yours, the golden age is like a siren, okay? I mean, it's just there waiting for us. Okay, so that's my point. I just don't know what is the evidence that in fact high school graduates 10, 20, 30 years ago. Incidentally, I do think the mom is right. Details about Beowulf are not as important as show up, be on time, you know, tolerate some boredom, interact with people.
Higher education, you're not looking at higher education.
Go ahead.
They're more important for higher education.
Yeah.
In other words, the argument you're making has nothing to do with higher education. That's the big point.
Yeah.
Let
No,
me say something about that because it gets me right in my heart. I'm not saying that we were better high school students or anybody was better high school students. I'm working on the premise that what have you done for me today last year? And the concerns in my research said that college teachers, and we're talking community college on up, this is a pretty select campus. I mean, it's the most selected campus in the country, and for whatever that's worth, you got a bunch of real top of the line kids here for the most part. I don't think there's too many bums walking around here. But my daughter stopped me one time a couple of years ago. She was particularly perturbed with some homework. She's one of those kids that doesn't like to do homework, but she makes an A on all the tests, and she averages about 75 to 85 with a lot of zeros. And she said, "Tell me the truth, Papa. Since you got out of high school, what, 50 years ago, have you ever once had the need to know the quadratic equation?" And I said, "No." And she says, "Aha!" And I said, "But Natasha, now I'm starting to sound like my mother." And I thought I'd be a lot older before I sounded like my mother, who's 92 and still kicking. I said, "It's not about knowing the quadratic equation, it's knowing how to solve problems. Every day since I got out of high school, I had to solve problems. Sometimes I knew the formula to the solution, most of the times I didn't." So, and that was where she started to learn to do problems backwards. That, you know, when you have a math problem and find the value of x and you've got three choices to pick from, I tell her, work the problem backwards and try each one of those numbers and see which one works. All of a sudden she started doing better. They don't teach that in 6th grade or 5th grade. They start teaching it about high school. But I gave it to her in 7th grade. And her math scores on the SAT this past year, when she was 13, her math scores went up to 52nd percentile against the state's high school graduates last year. And her critical writing was at the 62nd percentile, through the 13-year-old. and her essay was outstanding. And it does your heart good to see that. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a comment that I think that culture plays a big role in all of this, and that it's not, has never been part of. I don't think there are any good old days about secondary education in our society. When I was a high school student in the 70s, there was still not a culture, even in the so-called good old days. And I went to a really good school. A culture of learning hard, which exists in other countries. And I discovered this when I went to university in Germany. In Germany, the correct difference in the curriculum was incredible. The German students at university had learned in many subjects basically everything we would hope to learn in college, in school. And when they got to university, they drank beer and didn't come to class. And we caught up with them because we, in those days, I don't know about now, in those days we worked pretty hard at university. And I was working in the normal way, and I was the top student at this German university, working not that hard, drinking plenty of beer myself, but I was working 3 times harder than anybody else because that was the culture. Well, that's irrelevant. But there's a huge cultural difference. In Germany, university education was considered to be a privilege of the aristocracy. There's an ancient tradition of that. It's a leisure, exactly. It's a leisure activity. And no one does, and I was teaching at the University of Munich in the law faculty, and it drove me crazy. The students wouldn't do anything. They would sit around, and at best, they would be interested enough to come to class 1 out of 3 classes and be interested enough to at least talk about the subject. No, if you read anything, they didn't do anything. And they didn't expect to be graded for it if they even got grades at all. And so I think it's culture as much as anything. And we don't have that culture. Kids in school play more than they learn. And it's not part of our culture that you're supposed to work as a child. Maybe that's not all bad, but I think that's probably the first thing that you come up against when you start to wonder why kids aren't learning anything in school.
I had a class last May, 1-day class for AP English Lit, right at the end of the year, last week. And it's very unusual for a teacher to be out the last week. And I got to the class, and the teacher wasn't where to be seen. There were 12 people in the class, and there were 7 absent. And I said, where is everybody? They said, oh, today's the honor luncheon for the top 10 graduates of the class of 1,600 students. And each of the top 10 is a catered deal, and each student is allowed to bring their favorite teacher. And 7 of the top 10 are in this class, in one class, which is really special. And I asked the teacher, and I looked at the names. There were 7 names. 2 were what you would call traditionally American names, Smith. And 5 were what I would call Pakistan or India. Dollar Apollos, the double L I told me were probably from that part of the world. And when she came back a few days later, I said, what's going on here? Are these kids from this part of the world smarter than the kids that were born here?
No, it's culture.
No, she said no, they're not smarter. In fact, some of them aren't smart, but they'll out-hustle the Texas-born kids every time. She said of those 7 students, 6 are girls, 5 of them don't have televisions in their house, and 3 of them don't have cell phones. And they're all three generational homes. And so it's the out-hustle part, that's called part of the culture. Yes, ma'am, back in back.
I would support that. America has a problem with many Asians. I admit it. And the reason is that the culture of the family pushes kids acknowledge group in some area. I have had students who are almost near suicide for getting beat on sea because the family pushing them. And then you have other cultures where they say, the chaplain doesn't have a college degree, he's a billionaire, and he's something he knows everyone in Mexico, everywhere. So, I got to talk to a pocket hero. I said, what should I study? I can make money by studying the corner. I want to pick up to come around the corner. Like I can know more than my t-shirt. So that kind of thing. So this is a cultural factor which are reflected in the case of families in the problem. The family, I think both is right. Look back at the family. And what the families do within different tribal and cultural communities. My family pushed me, I think yours did too. But it's all the places a very different story. Now, how can the schools fill the gap?
The answer for that question, by the way, I heard this years ago from someone else. A student asked a teacher, how much do you make, Mr. So-and-so, and he said a number. And the student said, my dad's a truck driver and a high school dropout, and he makes more than that.
Right.
And the teacher didn't know how to answer. And I said, here's your answer. He said, yeah, your father makes more than I'm making out, but that's all he's ever going to make. And if you go to school, you have the option to make a lot more. If you drop out of school, you're always going to be a truck driver when it comes to wages. Now, that's not necessarily so, because there's some pretty rich guys that dropped out. But yes, ma'am.
In California, we get to the diplomas to nowhere through what we refer to as grade inflation, which is the example that you gave of the teacher, where the kids come in and he or she just gives them 100 points just for showing up. So we call that grade inflation. In the Los Angeles Unified School District, more than 50% of the students weren't going to graduate next year because they were not prepared. So they didn't pass what are called the A through G college prep courses with a C grade or better. So what the school board did was they lowered the grade, the passing grade to the D. And I want to stress that this was against the wishes of the kids who begged and pleaded to the school board. Don't give us a D. Those are diplomas going nowhere. Instead, prepare us. And parents protested. We had 500 people outside of the district, but they didn't, because that would mean taking on the whole issue of classroom instruction. So that's what's happening in California. My question to you then is, what's happening in Texas?
Well, Texas is they've come up with a deal this year to make sure people graduate. Now every school district at the high school level has a faculty committee, an academic committee, and they have the ability to ignore failure in two what I call solid course requirements. So you got 4 years of English, 2 years of math, 2 years of language, 3 years of science, and so on and so forth. They have the ability to overlook 2 failures and grant a general diploma. Now, it's not a diploma that allows you to apply to Stanford. It allows you to apply to local community college at the top. And then once you get 2 years out of the way, then you can go to a 4-year school. And so you've got kids graduating who never did pass physics, and maybe that's where this basketball player is going to slide on. Who knows? We'll know in a few weeks. SMU's appealing. But they got caught. They lied. And they proved that the head coach lied. I mean, he changed his mind 2 hours later and came back in and said, I misspoke. But they said, they treated it as, you lied the first time, that's a lie. There's no do-over. For a 75-year-old guy making $2 million a year. Mulligan. No mulligan. Yes, sir. Okay. Is that it?
Tim will give Tim the final question here.
I'd just like to know, why is it for all students that prepare for college, and most of the jobs are not for college graduates?
That's the second, that's part of my overall question, is why do we have to know, what's the English system about? You're about 13 or 14,
Asian B, examinations in the United States,
and you move on and
and
move
all
on.
most of those. There was a school where you could learn a job that did not require a university education, and if you're working today as a plumber or something like that, own the business, you might make as much money or more than a college graduate.
Exactly.
So why is it that
Unemployment rates of college graduates with those who did not graduate from college? Just Randy's point earlier. Just compare the unemployment rate of college graduates with those who did not.
By the way, I still appreciate Beowulf to some degree, but I wonder why we're teaching everything. And they taught it to me in '69. I think it's exception from Beowulf. But today I still remember 3182 lines of alliterative poetry, and between the 8th and the 11th century. and they don't know the person's name, or somebody.
It's our cultural patrimony, which is, I always like to point out the example of the Mayans who forgot how to read their own texts. And so,
Really?
Oh, they did.
I had no idea.
How they could read their own writing.
Well, I forgot the Mayan hour a few years ago.
That happened to me in Japanese. I studied Japanese for 2 years, and I used to know how to read it.
Don, I can't read.
Oh, you must be a joke. You must be a physician.
Oh, you had a joke?
Yeah, well, remember what it is?
I like that.
No. Francisco, with your lecture, you talked about a lot of school rankings. Well, Playboy magazine puts out an article, the top 10 party schools in the United States, colleges and universities. Well, I live about an hour and a half from East Carolina University, and they're known for being a party school. In fact, the second semester of the freshman class, only about half school matriculate. So anyhow, the magazine came out, everybody was waiting for it. They open it up, they start reading 1, 2, where's ECU? They get down to number 10, no ECU, and they're screaming. But then they noticed, and this is a true story, below that, there was an asterisk, and it said, ECU doesn't count because they're professional.
And that's their business model.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Andy.